afternoon, friends.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
As they say, welcome back to our platform. And it has always been an enriching experience, not only listening to here on this platform as well as other platforms, wherein you have been dissipating knowledge, which are not only enriching for the students of law, lawyers, judicial officers, and everyone. Those who have connected for the first time, we would like to inform Honorable Mr. Justice V. Ramkumar, former judge of Kerala High Court, who was also associated with the Kerala Judicial Academy. And after his superannuation, he has been giving various webinars and talks on different perspectives of law. If I stand correct, sir can make me stand corrected. Probably all his webinars are on the criminal jurisprudence and evolution of criminal law, because whatever I have seen on the YouTube, they only reflect on the criminal law. And what we have seen on the WhatsApp chats also.
Yes, I am a confirmed criminal.
It's on the lighter vein. One of the judges came on the platform. He said that somebody asked you whether you are a criminal lawyer or whether it's a criminal court. So he said, neither I'm a criminal lawyer nor I'm in a criminal court. So sometimes as a young lawyer, one invariably says that I'm in a, nowadays I'm looking after the criminal cases in the criminal court. So, and sir's webinars have always been well looked upon. And the most fascinating fact with Justice Ramkumar, and while bringing him on the platform, is that he has evolved a different evolution within the webinars. Like those who have been connected with us on the WhatsApp groups of Beyond Law CLC, the number we will share it on the platform itself, that he has evolved certain questions which he, according to him, are relevant for the purposes of regular bail as well as on the cancellation of bail. So he has formulated certain questions we have already shared on the WhatsApp groups. You can look into those questions. We will be taking these questions one by one. The seriatim of those questions will not be disturbed. The associates from the office would also read the questions so that it looks slightly engaging. And these are all questions which invariably boggle the mind of a lawyer or a common man as to what is the way forward. So basically, after this webinar, I'm quite sure, as they say, all sculptures go well when the sculptors chisels out the irrelevant part. So the issues which are bothering us in the mind of law, after these question and answer session being over, I'm quite sure that a sculpture of the capability of Justice Ramkumar would come out, which will be vouched upon as one of the best, and the sense of confidence which will be exuberated after this webinar amongst the participants who are watching us live on the Facebook or on this group, or those who will connect with us on the YouTube channel of Beyond Law CLC, where this webinar would also be uploaded. His level of thought process would be entirely different. Without taking much time, I will request Honorable Mr. Justice Ramkumar just to formally give the insights. Then I will start taking questions and I will ask, name the speaker, name the person who will be asking questions. Over to you, sir. Okay. What broader perspective you are about to give, then I will start taking the questions. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Vikas Shetarath. Good afternoon, friends. As you all know, my methodology, which is slightly different. I have a different methodology. I firmly believe that any law is better understood when actually applied to concrete fact situations, which usually come up for resolution before our courts. Therefore, when you apply the law to the fact situations, you get to learn the law better. That is my methodology. That is why I have formulated all these questions of great practical relevance. Once you answer those questions, of course, you need not answer, I will answer the questions. Once you answer the questions, you know the law better. And don't consider me as an expert on criminal law. I am only a facilitator who is willing to share his experience with you in expectation of learning a lot from you also. I am still a student of law and I will be so till my last breath.
So can I take the questions?
Wait, I'll let you. See, the word bail is used not only as a noun, as a verb also. When you say to bail a person, to bail an accused person, means to deliver him, deliver an arrested person to his sureties upon their giving security for his appearance at the time and place designed, and to submit to the jurisdiction of the court. That is to deliver the person to his sureties. That is the word bail when used as a verb. It can be also used as a noun. The word noun means surety. One meaning is sureties into whose custody the arrested person is delivered. Sureties. That is why in section 167 CRPC, you will come across the word, if he is prepared to offer bail. If he is prepared to offer bail means he is prepared to offer sureties. So bail as a noun also means sureties. There is yet another meaning for the word bail used as a noun. Bail means the privilege of being enlarged on bail. When you talk about that, I was able to get him bail, means you are able to get him bail. That is noun. The privilege of being enlarged on bail. So bail used as a noun has two meanings. One, the sureties into whose custody an arrested person is delivered. And two, the privilege of being enlarged on bail. That is bail as a noun. Now you can read question number 1, Mr. Vikas. Question 1.
So we start with a basic question, as Justice Ramkumar said. So what are bailable and non-bailable offences?
Yes, there is a popular misconception that if it is a non-bailable offence, nobody can grant bail. The bail cannot be obtained. That's not the meaning of the word non-bailable offence. See, while bailable offences are offences which are slightly not so graver, which are less graver, which are offences of which bail is as of right. Bail can be obtained as of right. Whereas non-bailable offence, court has got the discretion to grant or not to grant bail. It will largely depend upon the facts and circumstances of case. Now, the question as to whether the offence is bailable or not, one will have to look into the first schedule to the CRPC. Part 1 of the first schedule enumerates all the offences under the Indian Penal Code, and Part 2 specifies or gives a guideline regarding the offences under other laws, that is laws other than Indian Penal Code. So Indian Penal Code, Part 1 Indian Penal Code, Part 2 other laws other than Indian Penal Code. Now if you refer to column 5 of the first schedule to CRPC, you will find that each offence is shown either as a bailable offence or a non-bailable offence. To find out whether the offence is bailable or not, you will have to refer to first schedule to CRPC and column 5 thereof. Then in the case of other laws covered by part 2 of the first schedule, if the offence under other laws is punishable with imprisonment for 3 years or more, then it is treated as non-bailable. And if it is punishable with imprisonment for less than 3 years, it is treated as bailable. That is the guideline for considering whether the offence is bailable or not with regard to other laws. You may read question number 2.
Sir, I will unmute Mr. Rajesh. He will ask the question. Rajesh, you can ask the question. Rajesh? So he's not unmuting. What is the distinction between a bailable and a non-bailable offence?
I already mentioned that the distinction between bailable offence and non-bailable offence is that in the case of a bailable offence, the offender has a right to bail, has got the entitlement to bail as of right. He has the right. The bail cannot be refused to him. It is a bailable offence. You may refer to paragraphs 9 and 10 of Razik Lal versus Kishore, 2009, volume 4, SEC 446, 2009, volume 4, SEC 446. The magistrate or court is bound to grant him bail in the case of a bailable offence. And the accused is entitled to have who is alleged to have committed a bailable offence, he is entitled to bail as of right. Yet another decision is Vikas versus State of Rajasthan, not Vikas Chatrath, Vikas versus State of Rajasthan, 2014, volume 3 SEC 321. But in the case of a non-bailable offense, the offender is not entitled to bail as of right. It's his right to bail is dependent on various factors like the existence of any prima facie case or reasonable ground to believe that the accused committed the offense. Number 2, the nature and gravity of the alleged offense. Number 3, severity of punishment in the event of conviction. Number 4, danger of the accused absconding or fleeing from justice if released on bail. Then yet another parameter is character, behavior, means, position and standing of the accused. Supposing he is a habitual offender, court will be hesitant in granting him bail. Then likelihood of the offense being repeated. The likelihood of the offense being repeated. That also is one of the parameters which the court will have to go into before granting bail. Then reasonable apprehension of witnesses being influenced or intimidated. See, if he is capable of, this person is capable of influencing or intimidating the prosecution of witnesses, then also the court will be hesitant in granting bail in a non-bailable offense. Then the relative position of the victim and the danger of justice being thwarted by the grant of bail. All these considerations, parameters will have to be looked into by the court before granting an order for bail in the case of a non-bailable offense. You may refer to paragraphs 17 to 19 of Anil Kumar Yadav versus State, NCT of Delhi, 2018, volume 12 SEC 129, AIR corresponding to AIR 2017 Supreme Court 5398. I will repeat the citation. 2018, volume 12 SEC 129 corresponding to AIR 2017 Supreme Court 5398. That is the main distinction between bailable and non-bailable. Yes. Question 3.
Rajesh, you read the question.
Sir, can there be a bail?
Question 3.
Sir,
Question
can
three,
there
Rajesh.
be a classification of a bail?
Yes. Yes.
Can there be a classification of a bail?
Yes. Bail can be classified by means of two modes. One mode of classification is three sub-classifications. 3 classes are pre-trial and para-trial bail, one class. Then post-trial bail. Then post-sentence bail. These are the 3 classifications under the first classification. 3 classes. Post-trial and para-trial bail. Sections are Section 436 bailable offense, Section 436A, that is where the offense is non-capital offense and 1/2 of the minimum sentence has been undergone by the under trial prisoner, and 437 clauses 1, 2 and 6 non-bailable offenses. Then 437 capital A, bail to appear before the next appellate court. Then anticipatory order of bail to 438. Then 439 1A, bail by the High Court or the Court of Session. Then second class is post-trial bail. Post-trial bail is only one solitary section, Section 437(7). That is, after conclusion of trial but before judgment, if the court is of opinion that there are reasonable grounds for believing that the accused is not guilty of the offense, then the court has the discretion to grant bail. That is the post-trial bail. Then we have the post-sentence bail. That is after pronouncing the sentence under Section 389, Clause 3. If the convict on bail satisfies the convicting court that he intends to file an appeal, then the court shall grant him bail to the convict. In case the sentence of imprisonment is 3 years or below, in the case of a non-bailable offense, and without any limit in the case of a bailable offense. So 2 things are there. If it is a non-bailable offense, both whether bailable or non-bailable, he is on bail. The accused is on bail. He has been convicted while on bail. And then if it is a non-bailable offense and the sentence is 3 years or below, then he has a right to be enlarged on bail, provided he satisfies the court, the convicting court, that he intends to file an appeal. And in the case of a bailable offense, if he is on bail, and regardless of the length of the sentence imposed, if he satisfies the court that he intends to file an appeal, then he can be granted bail under section 389(3), that is post-conviction bail. This is one classification of bail. Then we can attempt yet another classification, that is 1, mandatory bail, 2, discretionary bail, and 3, default or compulsive bail. This mandatory bail, basically 436, bailable offense. Court has no discretion, it has to grant bail, 436(1). Then we will discuss 430, the nuances of section 436 while discussing another question. Then discretionary bail. Under discretionary bail, you have section 395(3) by the reference court. Supposing the court has got some legal issue to be decided by the High Court, sessions judge has got a legal issue to be decided by, it wants an interpretation of the Constitution or interpretation of some provision of law, and a legal issue is to be answered by the High Court. It can send a reference to the High Court. Pending a reference, the reference court can grant bail under section 395(3). Then 437(1), 2, and 6. 437(1) is non-bailable offense or bail for in a non-bailable offense during crime stage, during investigation stage. Then 437(2) is any stage, non-bailable offense. And 437(6), when trial not over within 60 days of the first day fixed for evidence. In spite of that, trial is not over, then it is a discretionary court can in its discretion grant bail. Then 438 is the order for anticipatory order for bail. That is, he is apprehending arrest, and if the court is satisfied, in a case of non-bailable offense, the court is satisfied, court can grant an anticipatory order for bail. And then 439(1)(a), bail by the High Court or the Court of Session. Then the last clause is default or compulsive bail. That is, bail due to the default in completing the investigation or in completing the trial. Bail due to default in completing the investigation is section 167(2) proviso. 2 periods are prescribed, sections 30 days and 60 days and 90 days. If within that period applicable to the offense, investigation is not complete, then whatever be the nature of the offense, the accused is entitled to default bail, which is at times called statutory bail. All bails are statutory. This is a misnomer. It is default bail, or rather the indefensive bail, bail or compulsive bail. Compulsion. There is a compulsion on the investigating agency to agree to the bail, because even if it does not agree, court is bound to grant bail. Then 436(a), accused under detention up to 1/2 of the maximum period of imprisonment prescribed for the offense, other than capital offense, and default in completing the trial. Trial is not over even after the lapse of 60 days. Then the accused is entitled to bail. That is default bail, default in completing the trial. Yet another default bail in completing trial is 437(6). Under trial in custody for 60 days from the first date fixed for trial, trial not over. Therefore, in that case also, he is entitled to bail. These are the broad classifications of bail. Yes, you can read question number 4.
Mandeep, you can read the 4th question.
Sir, I want to ask, what is the need for filing of a bail application?
What could be the purpose of filing a bail application? See, in the case of an anticipatory bail, the accused, the offender is apprehending, the alleged offender is apprehending arrest. Therefore, the purpose of filing an application for anticipatory bail is to get an order that in the event of his arrest in that offense, he may be granted bail by the arresting officer. Then in the case of a regular application, bail application, it is for getting release from the arrest already effected. He has already been arrested. he may either be in police custody or in judicial custody. Then he will have to be released from custody. So that is the application for regular bail. These are the need for arresting for filing a bail application. Now, arrest means physical restraint put on a person as a result of allegation or accusation that he has committed a crime or an offense of a quasi-criminal nature. You may refer to State of Punjab versus Ajaib Singh, AIR 1953, Supreme Court 10. State of Punjab versus Ajaib Singh, AIR 1953, Supreme Court, page 10. 5 judges, Constitution Bench. And the procedure for arrest of a person by a police officer and the formalities to be carried out by the police officer are contained in sections 41 and 41A to 41D of CRPC. 41D gives the arrestee a right to meet an advocate of his choice during his investigation by the police. But the said section states that the arrestee shall not be entitled to meet his advocate throughout the process of interrogation. No, he has no such right. He can consult the counsel at a stage during interrogation, that's all, not throughout. Then section 43 deals with the right of a private person to arrest an offender who commits a non-bailable and cognizable offense in his presence, or to arrest any proclaimed offender. A private person can arrest a proclaimed offender. Section 44 gives an executive or judicial magistrate to arrest or order the arrest of a person who commits an offense in the presence of such magistrate. Section 45 CRPC extends a protection from arrest to members of the armed forces. Then section 46 CRPC describes the manner of arrest by a police officer or any other person by actually touching or confining the body of the offender unless there is voluntary submission to custody by word or action. These are the formalities regarding arrest. Therefore, once a person is in custody, he will have to file a regular application or application for regular bail for getting his released from custody. Yes, question 5.
The fifth question, Mr. Jitendra Pal would be asking.
Yes. Yes, come on.
Yes, sir. So my question is, what is the custody for the purpose of section 437 and 439(1)A CRPC?
See, while in the case of an application under section 438 CRPC, that section enables a person to arm himself with an anticipatory order for bail in the event of his apprehended arrest. He is apprehending arrest. Therefore, he will arm himself with an order under section 438 that will be a direction to the arresting officer to grant him bail in the event of the apprehended arrest. And in the case of all other cases of offense where he is in custody, the word custody for the purpose of the bail need not necessarily be custody pursuant to an order of arrest by an authority, including the police. It is enough if such person voluntarily submits himself to the custody of the court and applies for bail. So 437 and 439 presupposes that the person applying for bail should be in custody. That custody need not necessarily be in pursuance of an arrest. It is enough if the person who seeks custody voluntarily submits himself to the custody of the court and applies for bail. This was answered by a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court, 2-judge bench, by Niranjan Singh versus Prabhagar Rajaram Karote, 1980, volume 2 SEC 559, corresponding to AIR 1980 Supreme Court 785. I will repeat the citation. 1980, volume 2 SEC 559, corresponding to AIR 1980 Supreme Court 785. Next question.
Yes, sir. I would like to ask that is it correct to say that bail is a form of detention?
Yes, see, when you are arrested by a police officer, you are in custody, and you apply for bail for getting yourself released from custody. Section 354 CRPC says, when an accused is ultimately acquitted of the offense, he shall be set at liberty forthwith. So is he not set at liberty when he is granted bail? He was in custody. He has been granted bail. So is he not released from custody? So can you not say that he has been set at liberty? There is a misconception that once an accused is granted bail, he has been set at liberty. No, he is not set at liberty. He was in the custody of law. When he was in custody, police custody or judicial custody, he was in the custody of law. His custody of law, his legal custody, has been transferred to the custody of sureties, 2 or more sureties, who are none other than jailers of his own choice. Instead of being confined to the 4 walls of the prison, he is transferred to the custody of law, to the custody of sureties who are his own jailers. He has chosen his jailers. They will be hereafter his jailers. So from custody of law, he is transferred to the custody of his sureties. He continues to be under the custody of the court, or rather court has got the ultimate authority to cancel his custody, again put him back to judicial or police custody. All those powers are there. There is a beautiful discussion of this in Halsbury's Laws of England. Again, there is a decision of the Rajasthan High Court, full bench. Mahesh Chand versus State of Rajasthan, 1985 Criminal Law Journal, page 3001, full bench, para 26, 1985 Criminal Law Journal, 3001, para 26, full bench of the Rajasthan High Court. There is a discussion of the Supreme Court also on similar line. There is yet another decision, that is Sul Fulchand Shah versus Union of India and others. Volume 2000, Volume 3 SCC 409. 2000, Volume 3 SCC 409. That decision also gives an insight regarding the nature of custody. So when a person is granted bail, yes, you are right. It is not as if he is set at liberty. His custody, he was in the custody of law. It has been transferred from the custody of law to the custody of the sureties, who are none other than his own jailers of his own choice. Yes. Question, sir. Next question.
Unmute. Yes, sir. Is there a proposition to the effect that bail is the rule and jail an exception? What is your take on that?
Yes. Very often it is said that bail is the rule and jail is the exception. Yes, there is such a proposition. Justice Krishna Iyer used to propound that theory. Bail is the rule and jail is an exception. So it is always to put him behind the walls is an exception. Bail is the rule. Balancing of competing factors like protection of personal liberty and ensuring the attendance of the accused at the trial have to be undertaken by the court. Innocence of the accused is to be presumed until he is proved guilty. See, he is insulated by the presumption of innocence. Hardship is caused to the accused on account of his detention before conviction. The pre-conviction detention. There is also the unnecessary burden on the state to keep in custody a person who is yet to be proved guilty. He is yet to be proved guilty. State is unnecessarily incurring the unnecessary expenditure to keep him in prison. Constitutionally protected liberty must be respected unless detention becomes a necessity. So bail is the rule and jail an exception. These are the classic observations made by the apex court in Sanjay Chandra versus CBI, 2012, Volume 1 SEC, page 40. 2012, Volume 1 SEC, page 40, corresponding to AIR 2012 Supreme Court 830. AIR 2012 Supreme Court 830. There are other decisions also. Anyway, this is enough for the sake of discussion. You may go on to next question.
Yamni, you can ask the question.
Good evening, sir. I would
Yes.
like to ask, in cases exclusively triable by a court of session, should the magistrate, while releasing the accused on bail, bind him to appear before the court of session also, as and when required?
See, the offense is exclusively triable by a court of session. Ultimately, the magistrate will have to commit the case to the court of session for trial because offense is exclusively triable by court of session. Now, the question is, while granting bail by the magistrate, or should the accused be bound over to appear before the court of session as and when required? Is there any enabling provision in the CRPC? Yes, there is an enabling. There are two provisions. Section 209, small a, Section 209A. I'm sorry, Section 209B. Section 209B CRPC and Section 441, Clause 3. Clause 3 of Section 441 CRPC mandate that when the accused is granted bail by the magistrate in an offense which is exclusively triable by a court of session, the magistrate has to impose a condition that he shall appear before the court of session as and when required. Therefore, very often, in fact, very often there is a practice among lawyers to ask for bail at every stage. Not necessary. Once bail is granted, it will endure till the final disposal of the case, till the end of the trial. There is a popular misconception that bail is only for a limited duration. No. Once bail is granted, in the absence of any condition imposed by the court or in the absence of cancellation of the bail by the court, that bail order will endure till the end of trial. You may refer to AIR 1982, Supreme Court 1463, 1463, 1982 Supreme Court 1463. Then regarding 441(3), where the magistrate can bind him over for appearing before the session court as and when required, there is a decision of Supreme Court also, Free Legal Aid Committee versus State of Bihar, AIR 1982 Supreme Court 1463, same decision. AIR 1982 Supreme Court 1463, same decision. That decision will show that the bail order, benefit of the bail order will endure till the end of trial. Yes. Question 9. Next question.
Jitendra Bhatta is asking the question.
Yes, sir. So Section 56 of CRPC enjoins that a person arrested shall be sent by the arresting police officer to the
Yes.
magistrate having jurisdiction in the case. But Section 167(1) of CRPC mandates that arrested person shall be forwarded to the nearest magistrate whether he has jurisdiction or not to try the case.
Yes.
How to
Yes.
reconcile between this apparent conflict?
How to reconcile between these two sections? Section 56 CRPC mandates. See, I will read the section. A police officer making an arrest without warrant shall, without unnecessary delay and subject to the provisions hereinafter contained as to bail, take or send the person arrested before a magistrate having jurisdiction in the case or before the officer in charge of a police station. So, a police officer effecting an arrest without a warrant has to produce him, take him to a magistrate having jurisdiction. Whereas under section 167(2), 167(1) says when a person is arrested and detained in custody, even before 24 hours is elapsed, he shall be produced before the nearest magistrate, who need not necessarily be the magistrate having jurisdiction to try the case. Therefore, you find some conflict between these two sections, 56 and 167(2), 167(1). 167(1) says a person arrested and detained by an officer in charge of a police station shall be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours. That nearest magistrate need not be the magistrate having jurisdiction. Whereas 56, section 56 says a police officer arresting an accused shall produce him before the magistrate having jurisdiction. How will you reconcile this apparent conflict? It is very easy. See, the section 56 is an option given to the arresting police officer. He is not detaining the arrestee. He is only arresting the offender without a warrant. Naturally, it's a cognizable offense. So he is arresting the offender without a warrant, and he has two options: either to produce him before the magistrate having jurisdiction to try the case, or before the station house officer in charge of the police station. Now, very often these arresting police officers will exercise the second option. They will produce the arrestee before the officer in charge of the police station, that is SHO. And 167 is a direction to the SHO that you shall produce the accused who has been arrested and detained in your custody before the nearest magistrate. See, that is a requirement of Article 22(2), Clause 2 of Article 22 of the Constitution, which says every arrestee shall be produced before the nearest magistrate without unnecessary delay, excluding the time taken for the journey. So 167, 1 and 2 is in compliance of Article 22, Clause 2 of Article 22. Therefore, that is why the distinction. One is an arresting officer who has two options: either to produce him before the magistrate having jurisdiction, or to produce him before the officer in charge of the police station. Very often they exercise the second option by producing him before the officer in charge of the police station. Once the arrestee is produced before the officer in charge of the police station, that is the SHO can detain him only for 24 hours. From before that, he has to produce him, before whom need not necessarily be the jurisdictional magistrate. Jurisdictional magistrate may be far away. Therefore, because therefore he will have to produce him before the nearest magistrate. This is in recognition of the constitutional right of the accused, that he has to be produced before the nearest magistrate, and nearest magistrate will have to order his remand, etc. Yes.
So there couldn't have been a better explanation between the subtle difference between Section 56 of the CRPC and Section 167, which you have explained.
Yes.
I will ask Pravishta to ask the next question, number 10. Pravishta?
Yeah.
Sir, for releasing the accused on bail, is it necessary that the magistrate should have jurisdiction to try the case or to commit the case?
Are you able to answer that? See, nearest magistrate, I said under Section 167, an officer in charge of a police station will have to produce the arrested accused, before the nearest magistrate. And it is the nearest magistrate who is remanding him to custody, to police or judicial custody. Now, if you carefully read Section 167, I'll read that. Whenever any person is arrested and detained in custody, and it appears that the investigation cannot be completed within the period of 24 hours fixed by Section 57, and there are reasonable grounds of believing that the accusation or information is well founded, and there are grounds for believing, and the police station, the officer in charge of the police station or the police officer making the investigation, if he is not below the rank of sub-inspector, shall forthwith transmit to the nearest judicial magistrate a copy of the entries in the diary hereinafter prescribed relating to the case, and shall at the same time forward the accused to such magistrate. So the accused is to be forwarded to the nearest judicial magistrate, who need not necessarily be the magistrate having jurisdiction to try the case. But then, and that magistrate, see, 167(2) says, the magistrate to whom an accused person is forwarded under this section may, whether he has or has not jurisdiction to try the case, from time to time authorize the detention of the accused in such custody as such magistrate thinks fit, for a term not exceeding 15 days in the whole. See, therefore, the nearest magistrate who does not have jurisdiction, whether he has jurisdiction or not, that's what the section says, whether he has jurisdiction or not to try the case, shall authorize the detention of the accused to judicial or police custody for 15 days at a time. But now our question is whether that magistrate should have jurisdiction to try the case if he wants to grant bail to the accused. Here, if the magistrate wants to remand the accused to custody, he need not have jurisdiction. But then we read on. And if the magistrate has no jurisdiction to try the case or commit it for trial and considers further detention unnecessary, he may order the accused to be forwarded to a magistrate having such jurisdiction. Therefore, this nearest magistrate who is not a jurisdictional magistrate can only remand the accused to police custody for 15 days or judicial custody for the rest of the days at a time for 15 days and from time to time. But the moment he entertains a doubt or he entertains a feeling that this person need not be remanded any further, this is a fit case where he should be granted bail, then this nearest magistrate who is not the jurisdictional magistrate cannot grant bail. He can only forward the accused to the magistrate having jurisdiction to try the case. That is the distinction between remand, power of remand and power to grant bail. Yes. Section itself is clear. Next question.
My next question is number 11. Is there any exception to the rule that a magistrate who is competent to try the case or commit the case alone can grant bail?
Now, we already seen that the jurisdictional magistrate alone can grant bail, even though he can remand. But if he wants to grant bail, he should be jurisdictional magistrate. Is there any exception to that rule? There are two exceptions to my knowledge. One is when a warrant is issued under section 78 CRPC for execution outside the jurisdiction of the magistrate and where the offense is non-bailable, then the CJM or sessions judge within whose jurisdiction his arrest has been made, they cannot try the offense. They are the persons they are the officers or judges in whose jurisdiction the arrest has been made. They can grant bail in view of the second proviso to section 81(1) CRPC. Second proviso to section 81(1) close the session judge or the CJM within whose territorial limits the arrest was made to grant bail. That is one case where a non-jurisdictional magistrate or court can grant bail. Then the other illustration is section 187 CRPC. If a person within the local jurisdiction of the magistrate commits an offense outside his jurisdiction, even though the magistrate cannot try the offender, magistrate can secure his presence of the offender and send him to the magistrate having jurisdiction, and during that interregnum period, the magistrate who does not have jurisdiction to try the offender can grant bail. 187 CRPC. These are the two sections wherein a non-jurisdictional court can grant bail. Otherwise, the court which has authority to grant bail is only the court which has jurisdiction to try the offender. Yes. Question 12.
The next question.
Sir, is it not desirable to insist on solvency certificate while the granting bail to the accused?
Yes. So very often judges or magistrates insist on solvency certificate. Solvency certificate means you will have to get a certificate from the revenue officials that this surety is a solvent surety. So surety will have to first appear before the revenue officials, produce their material, their title deed, etc., and the tahsildar or whoever be the revenue official will have to be satisfied that this person is a solvent person. Then and when the court insists on a solvency certificate, undue hardship is put to the accused in not only getting the surety but also in getting solvency certificates for the court. And Justice Krishna Iyer had occasion to observe that it is enough if the solvency is examined by asking the sureties to file affidavit. It is enough the court can insist on their affidavit for deciding their solvency. And if you insist on solvency certificate, it becomes a source of harassment. And please don't do that. Hussain Ara Khatun versus Home Secretary, State of Bihar, AIR 1979, Supreme Court 1360. AIR 1979, Supreme Court 1360. Yes, question 3. Yes, you are right. You are right.
Sir, is not an order granting or refusing bail appealable? Because this question invariably comes in the mind of any practitioner or common man. What is your take on that?
When a court has granted bail, and somebody is aggrieved by the grant of bail to the accused. He has been a problematic person in our community. So he has been granted bail. I want to challenge that order. Or a person is refused bail. Accused has been refused bail. He wants to go to the higher court. Should he not file an appeal? That is the usual doubt entertained by legal practitioners. Ordinarily, no. There is no provision in the CRPC providing for an appeal against an order granting bail. State of Gujarat versus Salim Bhai Abdul Ghaffar Sheikh, AR 2003 Supreme Court 3224, AR 2003 Supreme Court 3224. Again, there is no appeal against grant of regular bail. 2008, volume 13 SEC 584. That is Narendra K. Amin, Dr. Narendra K. Amin versus State of Gujarat. 2008, volume 13 SEC 584. But then there are instances where when the very legality of the bail order is to be questioned. This is a case where no sensible court would have granted bail. There are situations like that. No sensible court would have granted bail. Or a court has granted bail by not taking into account very important circumstances, very relevant circumstances, and omitting, by not taking into account relevant circumstances and taking into account totally irrelevant circumstances, and a bail has been granted. A person well instructed, a judge or magistrate well instructed in law and facts would not have granted bail in such a case. There can be such situations. Then the Supreme Court has taken the view that an appeal can be entertained for challenging the very order of granting bail. Very order granting bail. I will give you the citation. When the legality of the order granting bail is open to question, an appeal may be maintainable. You may refer to Union of India versus Hassan Ali Khan, 2011, volume 10 SEC 235, 2011, volume 10 SEC 235. Again, AIR 2005 Supreme Court 3490, State of UP versus Amar Mani Tripathi, AIR 2005 Supreme Court 3490. Again, in one case where the High Court had mechanically granted bail without taking into consideration all the relevant circumstances and without applying the necessary parameters while granting bail. The High Court had granted bail mechanically, as if in a routine manner. Supreme Court said appeal is maintainable at the instance of the complainant, and Supreme Court entertained the appeal and set aside the order and remanded the case to the High Court. Bridge Nandan Jaiswal versus Guna, 2009, volume 1 SEC 678, corresponding to AIR 2009 Supreme Court 1021. AIR 2009 Supreme Court 1021. Yes.
Yes, sir. Mandeep, ask the next question.
But you may one second. But you may note that there is a statutory appeal under the National Investigation Agency Act 2008, where the special court alone can entertain an application for bail, and if the special court grants bail or refuses bail, there is a statutory appeal. There's section 21(4) of the National Investigation Agency Act 2008 specifically provides for an appeal. Otherwise, CRPC does not allow an appeal against a refusal or grant of bail. But except in very exceptional cases, Supreme Court has entertained an appeal in cases where the bail ought not to have been granted. We will come across during the next question. We will consider those situations where bail should not have been granted. Those cases. Yes, still 40.
Sir, my next question is, will a revision lie against a grant of bail?
Yes. Now, what are the situations when a revision is entertainable? Revision, what is the power for revision? 397, is it not? Section 397 CRPC gives the power of revision to the Sessions Court as well as the High Court, is it not? And section 397 says the High Court or any session judge may call for and examine the record of any proceeding before any inferior criminal court situated within its or his local jurisdiction for the purpose of satisfying itself or himself as to the correctness, legality, or propriety of any finding, sentence, or order recorded or passed, and as to the regularity of any proceeding of such inferior court. So all these things can be looked into by the High Court or the Court of Session. Therefore, they have got wider powers under section 397. Therefore, supposing a magistrate has granted bail in a case where bail ought not to have been granted, the Kerala High Court in 2010 Criminal Law Journal 4137, 2010 Criminal Law Journal 4137, Prasad Jacob versus State of Kerala has held that that order can be set aside in the revisional jurisdiction of the Sessions Court or the High Court. In fact, that decision is in accord with two decisions of the Supreme Court, all by 3 judge benches of the Supreme Court. That is, Dinesh Emman versus State of Gujarat, 2008, Volume 5 SEC, page 66. 2008, Volume 5 SEC, page 66. 3 judges. Again, Narendra K. Amin, yes, Narendra K. Amin versus State of Gujarat, 2008, 13 SEC 584. 2008, 13 SEC 584. Again, 3 judges. There, their lordship held that it is the very order granting bail could be set aside in cases where the bail ought not to have been granted. Because it is, according to the Supreme Court, it is a perverse order. It is a perverse order for bail, where totally different from the concept. It is not cancellation of bail, mind you. You have to distinguish between the order setting aside the appellate or superior court setting aside the order granting bail, and the very same court or the superior court cancelling the order granting bail, cancelling the bail. See, bail can be cancelled only due to the post-bail conduct of the accused. If an accused has been granted bail subject to certain conditions. One condition is that he shall not commit any offence while on bail. Another condition is that he shall report before the police officer on particular dates during the stage of investigation. Supposing he violates those conditions, his bail can be cancelled. That's not a case where the order granting bail is set aside. Bail is cancelled due to the conduct of the accused. The accused, supposing the accused after grant of bail intimidates the prosecution witnesses, the victim. He goes to the victim and intimidates the prosecution witness, the victim. That's the case where it is attributable to the post-bail conduct of the accused. Therefore, the bail can be cancelled. But this is not that case. This is a case where a superior court setting aside the order granting bail for the reason that it is a perverse order. No reasonable judge or magistrate well instructed in law or fact would have granted bail in such a case. So court is setting aside the order. Yes, question 15.
Question 15 is not the accused who has been granted bail bound to appear before the court during the crime stage / investigation stage? What is your call on that?
Yes. See, the case is only FIR has been registered and copy of the FIR has been sent to the magistrate. Now the accused applies for bail. He is granted bail. Now, should he not appear before the magistrate on regular intervals? He need not. Accused need not appear before the magistrate because he has only applied for bail during investigation stage. Case is still under investigation. Just because a copy of the FIR is sent to the magistrate in compliance of section 157 CRPC, you can't say that the case is pending before the magistrate. Case will be pending before the magistrate only when, after the completion of investigation, the police file a final report, charge sheet before the court. Once the charge sheet is filed after the conclusion of investigation and the magistrate takes cognizance of the offence and issues process to the accused, then only the accused has a right to appear before the court. And then the magistrate can impose conditions. You appear on such and such date, etc. In a given case, not necessarily, or supposing the case is posted, on all the dates of posting you should appear. Magistrate can say. Otherwise, during investigation stage, he has no obligation to appear before the magistrate because no case is pending. There is a popular misconception that when an FIR is sent to the magistrate, case is pending before the magistrate. No, case is not pending before the magistrate. Case will pend before the magistrate only after the filing of the charge sheet, after the completion of investigation, and the magistrate takes cognizance of it. Until then, accused has no business to be there. That is why when 200 examination, sworn statement of the complainant and the witnesses in a private complaint is recorded by the court, accused has no business to participate in the proceedings. And Supreme Court has gone to the extent of saying that even if the accused happens to be present, he can only watch the proceedings. He has no right to participate in the proceedings because he has not been summoned to the court. Process is yet to be issued to the accused. That is why the case is not pending before the court. This legal proposition emboldened me to publish an article years back in the SEC as well as in the live law that constitutional courts cannot quash an FIR under section 482 CRPC because there are 4 decisions of the Supreme Court holding that power under section 482 CRPC, inherent power of the High Court, can be exercised only in respect of a matter pending in an inferior criminal court. The matter should be pending in an inferior criminal court. When an FIR is registered and a copy is sent to the magistrate, you cannot say that case is pending before the magistrate court. So constitutional court cannot exercise the power under 482. In fact, those of you who are interested in knowing that those decisions, AR 1977 Supreme Court 2229, again AR 2004 Supreme Court 1851, again 2009 Volume 10 SEC 488, again AR 2012 Supreme Court 364. These are the 4 decisions in which Supreme Court said power under 482 can be exercised only in respect of a matter pending in a inferior criminal court. So when a matter is not pending before an inferior criminal court, the FIR which is registered at the crime stage cannot be quashed by the constitutional courts. I think the Allahabad High Court has virtually taken that view subsequently, recently, but though not referring to my article. Yes, next question.
Sometimes one doesn't reflect the source of the information, but they are inspired by the inputs given by someone.
Maybe.
That's one. That could be one of the perspective.
Could be.
Yes. So Aman will be asking a question.
Yes.
Amanjot.
Sir, there is one proposition which says even though the principles of res judicata are not applicable to bail applications, it would lead to bad precedent if bail applications are filed repeatedly or successively without there being any change of circumstances. So, do you agree with this proposition?
See, if it were a civil court, then once a case is heard and finally decided, an issue which has been heard and finally decided, another case cannot be filed, another suit cannot be filed. That is the principle of res judicata before a civil court. Whereas there is no such principle in the criminal court. But at the same time, courts have evolved a principle that when a bail application has been dismissed, you cannot file successive repeated bail applications one after the other without any change of circumstance. Supposing the FIR is registered, grave offences have been allegedly committed. Accused goes to the magistrate and files an application. Dismissed, considering the fact that it is a grave offence, the investigation has only started. Next week, he files another application. It cannot be entertained because there is no change of circumstance. Supposing after investigation, after the conclusion of investigation, he again applies. That may be a situation where there is a change of circumstance. So without change of circumstance, an accused cannot go on repeatedly filing bail applications one after the other. It has been deprecated by the Supreme Court. Kalyan Chandra Sarkar versus Rajesh Ranjan, AIR 2004 Supreme Court to 1866, AIR 2004 Supreme Court 1866. Again, Prasad Shrikant Purohit versus State of Maharashtra 2018 11 SEC 458. And in one case, Supreme Court said successive bail applications may even amount to forum shopping, because there is an earlier decision of the Supreme Court which says that once a bail application has been disposed of by a particular judge, subsequent bail applications also should be heard and disposed of by the very same judge if he is available. If that judge is available, he alone, because he has already studied the matter, he had already looked into the matter. Therefore, that judge alone should, otherwise it will result in diametrically opposite orders. And accused also may be indulging in forum shopping or forum hunting. That is what the Supreme Court expressed that practice as forum shopping. Jagmohan Bal versus State NCT of Delhi, 2014, volume 16 SEC 501. 2014, volume 16 SEC 501. You may read next question.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, does section 436 CRPC authorize the magistrate to release on bail a person who is not accused of any offense but has been arrested and produced before the magistrate?
Yes. If you carefully read section 436, you will find that when any person other than a person accused of a non-bailable offense, a person accused of a non-bailable offense is covered by section 437, not 436. Therefore, any person other than a person accused of a non-bailable offense covered by section 437, he is arrested by a police officer. So that person need not be an accused even. The only thing is he should not be a person accused of a non-bailable offense. That's all. So any person other than a person accused of a non-bailable offense is arrested by a police officer without a warrant, that is under section 56, or is detained in custody by the SHO, that is under officer in charge of a police station, that is under section 167(1), or appears or is brought before a court pursuant to summons or warrant under section 204 CRPC. And such person is prepared to offer bail. See, bail, noun, used as a noun, sureties. Prepared to offer bail means offer sureties. Such person shall be released on bail. Such person shall be released on bail. Therefore, you see, the police officer has no discretion in the matter. That is why I earlier mentioned that decision. Unlike section 437, the person covered under section 436 CRPC need not be accused of any offense at all. There are circumstances, for example, there are circumstances like section 41(1) clauses B to I of CRPC and section 151 CRPC, etc., under which a person may be arrested by a police officer on mere suspicion. It is a suspicious arrest, preventive arrest. In such a case, that person cannot be detained by the police officer beyond 24 hours because there is no offense. There is no offense. It's only a suspicion. Therefore, the police officer himself will have to release him unconditionally before once 24 hours is over. And if at all he is produced before a magistrate shall release him on bail. Because these are not offenses. These are only suspicious arrests or preventive arrests made by a police officer who has got the power to arrest him. But once he is detained for more than 24 hours, before which an offense is not incorporated. Therefore, before the expiry of 24 hours, the police officer will have to incorporate an offense which he has committed. If the police officer is not able to incorporate an offense which the accused has committed, then police officer is bound to release him. This is what the Supreme Court said in Ahmad Noor Mohammad Bhatti versus State of Gujarat, AR 2005 Supreme Court 2115, AR 2005 Supreme Court 2115. Within 24 hours, if an offense is not incorporated, the person who has been arrested on suspicion will have to be released forthwith. Yes, question 80. Yes, question.
Yes, Yamini.
Sir, I would like to ask, an accused who is alleged to have committed a bailable offense fails to appear in response to the summons issued against him. He is arrested and produced before court pursuant to a warrant issued against him. Is he entitled to bail as of right?
See the position. Even it is a bailable offense where he has got a right to bail. Bail as of, he can claim bail as of right. But when summons was issued to him, he did not respond to summons. Therefore, the magistrate had to issue warrant of arrest, and the police officer arrested him and brought him before court. Then can he claim bail? The bailable offense. He can claim bail. Bail is as of right. He has a right to bail. He can. Of course, he did not respond to the summons. Therefore, warrant had to be issued. What is the purpose of warrant? Only to secure his presence in court, secure his attendance in court. Once he is before court, offense being bailable, he is entitled to bail as of right. In the case of a bailable offense, accused is entitled to bail as of right. Because I have already given you a citation, not because Chatterjee, but because versus State of Rajasthan, 2014, Volume 3, SEC 321. Yes, next question.
Yes, sir. So this is, who else other than the accused person can be ordered to be arrested and produced before court?
Yes. Is there any person other than the accused who can be ordered to be arrested and produced before court?
Yes.
Supposing a witness does not respond to the summons, he does not respond to the summons and appear before court for giving evidence, there can be a warrant of arrest issued to him, and the presence of the witness can be secured before court. But only that much. Once he is before court, he can be released on bail because he has not committed any offense. Only thing is, he did not respond to the summons. That's all. Therefore, a witness is a person who can be ordered to be arrested under section 87 of the CRPC. After production, if he is prepared to offer bail, he will have to be granted bail. Question 20. Next question.
So, before 20th question, a friend of mine has posted a question and he has timed in the chat box also. He says, can a de facto complainant challenge the bail granted by the Sessions Court? If yes, what is the remedy? Section 482 or any other remedy?
Even 397, in a case where bail ought not to have been granted. Bail ought, see that I gave you two citations of 3-judge bench decisions arising from Gujarat. Those decisions, Supreme Court says that it is a perverse bail order. Bail order is a perverse order where no sensible magistrate would have granted bail. But bail has been granted because it may be a very grave offense, rape and murder, for instance. And such a grave offense, and the de facto complainant and the members of that cross section of the society are aggrieved by the grant of bail, they can certainly move the superior court. And I gave you the Kerala citation that even revision will be maintainable under 397 before a court of session, can be challenged. But ordinarily no appeal. Ordinarily no appeal under the CRPC. There's no appeal. But Supreme Court alone has entertained appeals from orders granting bail. I gave you the citation. The High Court mechanically granted bail without looking into the circumstance of the case. Supreme Court said this order cannot be supported. Therefore, we are entertaining the appeal by the de facto complainant. If an appeal by the de facto complainant is maintainable before the Supreme Court, Why not a revision before a sessions judge? In fact, that is what the Kerala High Court did, speaking through this humble self. Yes.
So the law laid down by you is path breaking, and I think Pranav,
Yes.
not only Pranav, Pranav Kohli who has posted the question, all would be enlightened by that.
Yes, I was able to do justice in advance, even before the Supreme Court declared the law. Yes.
So the declaration of law while being a judge of the High Court is as good as that. The ultimately, and large number of judgments we find that are in fact affirmed or sometimes taken cue from that and put forth further insights to that are added.
Yes. We had a district judge. We had a district judge in Kerala who had a whose mindset is worth emulation. He used to say, if my judgments are affirmed by the High Court, I am happy because I was able to do justice in advance. If on the contrary, my decisions are reversed by the High Court, I am happier because my illegality was not perpetrated.
So they say
that should be the mindset of every judicial officer, every officer of the subordinate judiciary. That should be the mindset. You should not get perturbed by the fact that your decision is overruled or reversed by the superior court. No. Take it as it is.
Even otherwise, they say to err is human and to forgive is divine.
Exactly. And once you render your verdict, you are functus officio. Your role is over. Then whatever happens, take it in that spirit. Yes.
Functus officio terminology invariably we use in the labor court matters. To be applied in a criminal law gives a different perspective.
Everywhere. It is a Latin maxim, that's all.
That's true, but invariably we will use in a case of a labor law matter, the tribunal has become a functus officio.
Yes, because they don't have any power of review.
Yes, sir.
Unless statutorily conferred. No, there is no inherent power of review in any body. Yes.
So Pravishta would ask the question. Pravishta? Pravishta? I am unmuting her.
All right.
Sometimes to maintain the hygiene of the platform, you tend to forget it.
Yes. You can read, no problem.
Can the court
impose? Yes.
Can the court impose a condition, for instance, a condition that the accused should appear before the police while granting bail in a bailable offence?
We have seen that bailable offence, bail is a right. The accused is entitled to bail as of right in a bailable offence. Court cannot refuse bail. Then the further question is whether the court can impose a condition in a bailable offence while granting bail. You shall appear before the police. Can such a condition be imposed? Is the question. No, such a condition cannot be imposed. In the case of a bailable offence, such a condition that you shall appear before the police cannot be imposed. That is what the Kerala High Court held in 1978 KLT 337 by Justice Kochu Thoman, who was subsequently elevated to the Supreme Court, who was a judge of the Supreme Court. Justice Kochu Thoman. 1978 KLT 337. Yes, next question.
So, is the requirement in the bail order and in the bail bond in a bailable offence that the accused should attend the court at the time and place specified therein a bail condition, or what is your take on that?
Yes, because even in a bailable offence, while the court granting bail, court may say that you shall appear before the court. Is it not a condition? And if you say that no condition can be imposed in a bailable offence, is it not a condition? Kerala High Court has taken the view that it is not a condition, that every person who is granted bail has to appear before the court on the appropriate dates of posting. Therefore, that is a condition for appearance. So that's rather a term as Kerala High Court has taken the view. Asking Kerala High Court speaking through Justice U. Lakshmi Narayana Bhatt in Aziz versus State 1984 KLT 437 held that it is only a term as to bail, not a condition. If it is a condition, it cannot be imposed in a bailable offence. Yes, 84 KLT 437. Then, supposing if it is even in a bailable offence, if the term is to he shall appear before court, and if he fails to appear, then it is a violation of the or breach of the term of bail, and action can be taken under section 446 CRPC. For that, you can refer to 1999 volume 8 SEC 660. 1999 volume 8 SEC 660. Muhammad Kunju versus State of Karnataka. The Supreme Court said, yes, 660. In case he violates the condition, he can be proceeded against under section 4. Not only he, the sureties also can be proceeded against under section 446 CRPC. Next question. 22. Question.
Question number 22. When an accused person is granted bail with stresses, is there any contract and has the state government any role in it?
Yes. What is your take on that? When an accused is granted bail, has the state government got any role in that? Accused and the sureties. Accused is granted bail with sureties. Has the state government got any role in that? That is the question. Why should the state government walk in a case where the court is granting bail to an accused person with sureties? After all, it is between the accused and the sureties and the court, is it not? Why should the state government be roped in? That is the question. See, you may all refer to form number 45 in the second schedule to CRPC. Form number 45 of the second schedule to CRPC contains the bail bond. The bail bond. Bail bond is a contract executed by the accused and the sureties in favor of the government. Though it is the court is signing the document, and the accused and the sureties, the court is acting as an agent of the government, and it is actually a contract between the accused and the sureties with the government. And what is the wording of the section, wording of the form? In the accused undertakes to appear before court on all the dates of posting. And in case I fail to appear, I shall forfeit to the government a sum of rupees 5,000 or 10,000, whichever is fixed by the court. When a court is granting bail to an accused, court will say in the bail order, accused is granted bail on is executing a bond with two solvent sureties, each for the like amount to the satisfaction of the court, a sum of rupees 10,000. Supposing the court fixes 10,000, accused is granted bail on his executing a bond for rupees 10,000 with two solvent sureties, each for the said amount. Means accused will have to execute a bond, and that bond is a contract between the accused on the one hand and the court on behalf of the government, and the sureties on the other hand with the court on behalf of the government. And what are the wordings in this in form number 45? I shall appear before this court on all the dates of posting. In case I fail to appear, in case I commit breach in the condition to appear, I shall forfeit to the government a sum of rupees 10,000 fixed by the court. Therefore, he will have to forego 10,000 rupees. Likewise, sureties, there is a contract between the sureties also. Form number 45 contains a contract between the sureties and the court also. Their sureties also will say, we will, in the event of the accused remaining absent before court, we shall forfeit to the government. Each of us shall forfeit to the government a sum of rupees 10,000 to the government. So that is how the government steps in. So that is, in fact, all these aspects were, and these contracts between the accused and the government and the sureties and the government can be separately enforced by the court in the event of failure of the accused to appear before court. AIR 1979 Supreme Court 1498 Ramlal versus State of UP. AIR 1979 Supreme Court 1498. Again, it was reiterated by Supreme Court in 1999 Volume 8 SCC 660. 1999 Volume 8 SCC 660. That is how the relevance of government comes in an application for bail. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Next question.
So can the magistrate grant bail under section 437 of CRPC if the offence is punishable with death or in the alternative with the imprisonment of life.
Yes. So kindly refer to section 437. 437 is the provision for granting bail in respect of a non-bailable offence. Is it not? When any person accused of or suspected of the commission of any non-bailable offence is arrested or detained without warrant by an officer in charge of a police station, or appears or is brought before a court other than the High Court or Court of Session. So a court other than the High Court or Court of Session means a magistrate court or a special court. He may be released on bail, but see the two clauses. Clause 1. Such person shall not be so released if there appear reasonable grounds for believing that he has been guilty of an offence punishable with death or imprisonment for life. Death or imprisonment for life means it has been interpreted by the courts to mean that that offence should be punishable with death or imprisonment for life in the alternative. The alternative. See, Kerala High Court has taken the view interpreting this death or imprisonment. It's not as if the offence is punishable with death, cannot be granted. If the offence is punishable with imprisonment for life, cannot be granted. Because, for example, 326 is an offence which is punishable with imprisonment for life. Likewise, 436 is an offence which is punishable with imprisonment for life. These offences can be tried by a magistrate. Is it not? Therefore, it is not as if the offence is punishable with imprisonment for life, magistrate cannot grant bail. The offence should be punishable with death or in the alternative with imprisonment for life for the same offence. The punishment should be either death or imprisonment for life. For example, murder or section 121 CRPC for IPC for waging war or attempt to or abetment to wage war against the government of India is yet another offence punishable with murder or imprisonment for life. Murder 302 is an offence punishable with death or in the alternative imprisonment for life. If these are the offences, then magistrate cannot grant bail. That is the wording of section. And you may refer to Sundeep Kumar Bafna. Sundeep Kumar Bafna versus State of Maharashtra, paragraphs 8 to 10 and 16. Paragraphs 8 to 10 and 16. 2014, 16 SCC 623. 2014, 16 SCC 623 corresponding to AIR 2014 Supreme Court 1745. 1745. Supreme Court has made it clear that if the offence is punishable with death or in the alternative imprisonment for life, magistrate cannot grant bail. Yes. Let me read the next question. Question 24.
Yes, sir. 20. Which question, sir?
24.
24.
Yes.
Mandeep would be asking. Mandeep.
Is not the magistrate debarred from granting bail in a case where the offences are exclusively triable by a court of session?
See, barring the clause 1 under section 437(1), which we just now referred to, that is, if the offence is punishable with death or in the alternative with imprisonment for life, for example, murder or 121 IPC. Barring that, all other offences, magistrate is capable of granting bail. But then, because there are offences which are exclusively triable by court of session, merely because the offence is exclusively triable by court of session, barring death and 302 and 121 IPC, all other offences, though there are other offences, all other offences which are exclusively triable by court of session, magistrate can grant bail. But then Supreme Court has made it clear that if the offence is exclusively triable by court of session, magistrate should direct the accused to approach the sessions court for bail. Even though technically magistrate is entitled to grant bail, magistrate should direct the accused to approach the session court for bail. Prahlad Singh Bhatti versus NCT of Delhi, AR 2001 Supreme Court 1444. AR 2001 Supreme Court 1444 144. Yes. Question 25.
So before taking the question, I would like to thank Advocate Swati because she has been posting all the citations which you have been.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Question number 25. Is it permissible for the magistrate to grant bail to a woman against whom there are reasonable grounds for believing that she has been guilty of murder?
Yes. See, we have seen clauses 1 and 1. We have seen clause 1 under section 437(1). Then clause 2, a previous conviction. There also the magistrate cannot grant bail. Then there is a proviso. First proviso, provided that the court may direct that a person referred to in clause 1 or clause 2 be released on bail if such person is under the age of 18 years or is a woman or a sick or infirm person. Therefore, if the offence is, if the magistrate is satisfied, even if the magistrate is satisfied that there are reasonable grounds for believing that the woman is guilty of murder, where the magistrate cannot grant bail under clause 1. By virtue of the first proviso to section 437(1), if the offender is a woman, sick or infirm person, or a juvenile, below age of 16 was the section. Now it has been taken over by the Children Act, Juvenile Justice Act. Therefore, if in the case of such a person, even if the magistrate has reasonable grounds of believing that that person has, that offender has committed the offence, he can grant bail by virtue of the first proviso to section 437(1) CRPC. Yes. Next question.
Yes. Question number 26 is that is an officer in charge of a police station empowered to grant bail in non-bailable offences under section 437 of CRPC?
Yes. Can an SHO, station house officer, grant bail in the case of a non-bailable offence? Bailable offence we have seen, he can. What about non-bailable offence? I will read the section again. 437(1). When any person accused of or suspected of the commission of any non-bailable offence is arrested or detained without warrant by an officer in charge of a police station, or appears or is brought before court of other than the High Court or Court of Session, that is Magistrate Court or Special Court, he may be released on bail. So when a person has been arrested and detained by an officer in charge of a police station, or is arrested or appears before court, he may be released on bail means both the officer in charge of the police station as well as the magistrate or court can grant him bail. There is a popular misconception that in the case of non-bailable offence, an officer in charge of a police station cannot grant bail. And the lawyer community very often will not be happy to concede that power to the officer in charge of a police station. But you read section 437(1), 2, 4, clause 4, clause 6, etc. An officer in charge of a police station has also got the power to grant bail. Now, the position is he will have to grant bail on the accused if the accused is prepared to furnish bail, that is furnish sureties, and the accused will have to execute a bond. Police officer also can impose conditions, and that bond will have to be forwarded to the magistrate having jurisdiction. After the execution of the bond, the police officer, SHO, will have to forward the bond to the magistrate having jurisdiction. In the event of the accused violating any of the bail conditions, police officer cannot take action. The magistrate alone can take action. That's all. Otherwise, the police officer can grant bail even in respect of a non-bailable offence. Yes.
So we will be taking the next question, but
Yes.
a slight breach of that because Kumara has asked that kindly take my question. One accused couple and family, that is 5, are taking 3 cognizable criminal offences, 3 different FIRs.
Why not we discuss all these things at the end of the session? We will be running short of time.
Yeah, that's
And in case we don't find time, you can you can send that written doubt to me. I will give you a written answer. No problem.
Also, we will take a separate session because people love you to be called on the platform.
I don't think I will have time because I am otherwise heavily booked.
So only the overbooked persons are time and again being called and because it's a popular demand. They,
Yes.
they say that the popular speakers are not like a running water which you cannot touch twice.
Yes.
Yes. So
All
27.
good in saying.
Is not an officer in charge of a police station also empowered to grant bail? Under
That
section
we
4
answered. That we answered. Question 28.
no, of a sick and firm one.
Pardon?
Okay. This is by Yamni. Yamni will take the question.
Yes.
Yes, Yamni.
Yes. Question 27. You are right. 27.
Should I read it?
Yes, you can read. 27.
Yes. Is not an officer in charge of a police station also empowered to grant bail under section 437 CRPC to a sick and infirm woman against whom there are reasonable grounds for believing that she has been guilty of the offense of murder?
See, we have seen that under section, under clause 1 of section 437(1), if the offense is where there is a reasonable ground of believing that the offender has committed an offense punishable with death or in the alternative imprisonment for life, that is murder or 201, 121 IPC, then the officer in charge of the police station as well as the court cannot grant bail. Then we have seen the first proviso to section 437(1), where under court is entitled to grant bail to in a case falling under clause 1, provided the offender is a woman, sick or infirm person, or a juvenile. Now there proviso mentions court only. So in the case of in a case falling under the first proviso to section 437, court alone has been given the power to grant bail to a woman, sick person, or infirm person, or a juvenile. Therefore, the police, even though the police officer can grant bail in respect of a non-bailable offence under section 437(1), if the offence relates to clause 1 and read with the first proviso, and the offender is a woman, sick or infirm person, or a juvenile, then the court alone is given the power to grant bail. That power is not given to the police officer. That should be taken special note of. Then question number 28.
Yamni? Yamni, read the question.
Yes, sir. Is the public prosecutor entitled to an opportunity of being heard as of right before the magistrate in all non-bailable offences?
Whether, see, the fourth proviso to section 437(1) say that the public prosecutor shall be entitled to notice. Then is it in all non-bailable offences? No. Only if the offence is punishable with death, imprisonment for life, or imprisonment for 7 years or more. If the offence is punishable with death, or imprisonment for life, or imprisonment for 7 years or more, then public prosecutor is entitled to be heard. He is entitled to notice on the bail application. After hearing him only, bail can be granted. Yes, 437(1), fourth proviso. Question 29.
Yes, sir. Is there any category of case in which mandatory bail conditions are to be imposed, and if so, which are they?
There are 3 categories of cases in which the statute itself imposes certain mandatory bail conditions while granting bail. Those offences are, if the offence is punishable, that is, you will get those offences in section 437 clause 3. Clause 3 of section 437 CRPC enumerates those class of offences. One is offence punishable with imprisonment for 7 years or more. Second, if the offence falls under chapter 6, that is offences against state, sections 121 to 130 of the Indian Penal Code, or chapter 16, offences affecting human body, section 299 to 377 IPC, or chapter 17, offences against property, section 378 to 462 of the Indian Penal Code, or abetment or criminal conspiracy to commit or attempt to commit any of those offences. In those categories of offences, if the court is granting bail, there are certain conditions to be mandatorily imposed, which is there in 437(3) CRPC. But then you may kindly note that 437(3) says when a person accused of or suspected of the commission of the offence punishable with so and so is released on bail under subsection 1, the court shall impose the conditions. The court shall impose, there are 3 conditions mentioned in this section. Court shall impose the condition. Supposing for the very same offences, police officer in charge of the police station is also entitled to grant bail. There is no such condition. No condition is imposed. These conditions need not be imposed by a police officer. Therefore, if they are very grave offences, if those grave offences court is granting bail, court has to impose those 3 bail conditions. Whereas if the police officer is granting bail, he need not impose those conditions. It's a causus omissus. Then omissus of, it's a legislative omission. But actually, it has not been properly worded. Actually, in my view, the framers of the code could have said that if any of these, if bail is granted for any of these offences, then these bail conditions shall be deemed to have been imposed engrafted in the bail order. Court need not. Therefore, supposing these offences are committed and a court is granting bail, X judge may grant bail without these conditions. Y judge may grant bail with these conditions, though they are mandatory under the section. Therefore, instead of leaving it to the court, a mandatory condition should not have been left to the court. It could have been said that these conditions shall be deemed to have been imposed when court is granting bail in any of these conditions. Now, there is one doubt which was asked by Mr. Ganesh Gupta from Maharashtra, Bombay, even before our class. He wanted to know whether this condition is applicable to when the High Court or the Sessions Court is granting bail. Technically, it is not applicable. Court, it only says court, and it is in 437. Whereas 439(1)(a) is the provision enabling the Court of Session and the High Court to grant bail. Supposing Court of Session or the High Court is granting bail in respect of an offence falling under section 437(3), technically they are not bound. But I would say that they should also impose those conditions. In fact, this is a case where the legislature should have made a sort of a deeming provision in 437(3). Yes, question 30.
Sir, why not during these Corona lockdown days impose a mandatory bail condition to download Arogya Setu app and keep the applicant's GPS and Bluetooth open?
Such a condition imposed by an additional session judge in the Patiala Court Complex, New Delhi, was frowned upon and disapproved. Not permissible. Yes. Next question.
Yes,
Question 30.
The defense lawyer argues that unless the accused is released on bail, he will not be able to defend his case effectively. Is it a valid ground, or it's a ground to seek the bail? What is your take on that?
See, there are 2 answers. One decision of the Supreme Court says, if that contention is accepted, in every case the counsel can say, the accused can say, see, unless I am out, I cannot meet my counsel, discuss the issue with him and prepare the bail application, etc. Therefore, I will have to shape my defense only by being released on bail. I will have to be granted bail. But Supreme Court said, if that is a valid contention, such a contention is available in each and every case. This is what the Supreme Court said in Rajesh Ranjan Yadav versus CBI, AR 2007 Supreme Court 451. But those of you who are practicing in the Supreme Court, I'll give you one tip. There is one decision by Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer, sitting single, in Gudikandi Narasimhulu versus Public Prosecutor High Court of Andhra Pradesh, 1978, Volume 1 SEC 240. There is an observation by Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer that it makes sense to assume that a man on bail has a better chance to prepare or present his case than one remanded to custody. There is an observation by Justice Krishna Iyer. Any one of you practicing in the Supreme Court can request a larger bench of the Supreme Court to reconsider the earlier view by referring to Justice Krishna Iyer's observation. Otherwise, no, because it's only a single judge. Justice Krishna Iyer sitting single. maybe during vacation. Otherwise, the Supreme Court judges, they sit only in two. Justice Krishna was sitting single, maybe during vacation also. It's an observation in a reported decision. The corresponding AR is AR 1978, Supreme Court 429. His Lordship has said that unless he is out, he is not able to frame his defense. To present his case, prepare his case and present his case. Yes, question 30.
Yes, sir. 32 question. Rajesh is taking up.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, you may read.
Question number 32 is it not permissible for the court to the reject bail for the reason that the sureties are from another district or the state, or that the properties are situated in the another district or state?
The accused is prepared to furnish bail, sureties. We have seen furnish bail means furnish sureties. He is prepared to furnish sureties. Court is inclined to grant him bail, but when the accused furnishes sureties, sureties are from another state, or the properties of the sureties are in some other state. Court is rejecting the application. Supreme Court, speaking through Justice Krishna Iyer, came down heavily on courts taking this view. In Moti Ram versus State of Madhya Pradesh, AIR 1978, Supreme Court 1594. Moti Ram versus State of Madhya Pradesh, AIR 1978, Supreme Court 1594. Supreme Court said, no, nothing doing. Yes, 1594. The court is obliged to grant bail, and the court cannot take up this technical contention that sureties are from some other state or their properties are situated in some other state. No. Question 33. Yes. I'm not audible.
Yes, sir. The accused withdraws the bail application filed by him before the High Court. Subsequently, he files the bail application before the Session Court. The public prosecutor opposes the said application, contending that the subsequent bail application will lie before the High Court only. Is the objection raised by the public prosecutor valid or not?
This is a practical situation which very often arises. You file an application before the High Court. Judge is very much against you. You say that I may be permitted to withdraw the application. You withdraw the application. Then you approach the Session Court, saying that there is a change of circumstance. So the public prosecutor there takes an exception, takes objection. You know, he has once moved the High Court, so he can move only the High Court. What is your view on that? Supreme Court said nothing wrong, because the High Court did not consider the case on merits. No decision was rendered on merits. Therefore, nothing wrong if he filed a subsequent bail application before a Session Court, and he need not approve the High Court with the application. Sharad versus State of Maharashtra, 2019. I have got only Kerala citation. It's Supreme Court, Kerala High Court cases, KHC 6986, 2019, KHC 6986, corresponding to CDJ 2019, Supreme Court 1026. CDJ 2019, Supreme Court 1026. Yes, you're right.
This will
Question
be my 34th question on this part of the
Yes.
thing. This is the last question on this aspect. Mandeep, she will share the honors of reading the last question.
Where successive, question number 34, where successive bail application have been rejected by the High Court, is there any requirement that the subsequent bail application is to be placed before the same judge?
Yes, I told you that there's a practice that once a bail application has been disposed of by one particular judge, then successive bail application in the same case will have to be considered and heard by the very same judge if he is available. The citation is 1987, Volume 2 SEC 684, corresponding to AIR 1987, Supreme Court 1613. AIR 1987, Supreme Court 1613. That is why when successive bail applications are filed, and the same judge who is available is tried to be avoided, then Supreme Court said it amount to forum shopping. Yes.
But
Now
sir, in our High Court, the practice is the matter is posted before the same bench, and then they say since it is alleged that there are some changed circumstances, it can be listed as per roster.
Then that judge will have to say, is it not?
Yes, yes.
But
That
then-
is one
but
of our in our High Court. This practice is quite often.
But then Supreme Court decision is binding because
No,
Supreme Court says,
to this effect only that it goes before that bench, but that bench says, let's assume he has shifted with the flux of time to the division bench or his roster is of civil, then he says let it go to the ordinary course if he so desires. It's not mandatorily done.
it has to be, because otherwise it will amount to forum shopping is the finding of this observation of the Supreme Court in some other case, which I have given you citation. Because of course that roster, as per the roster, he may be disposing of civil cases, but then he is the person who had dealt with the case, who is posted with the facts and circumstances of the case. And if you give the option to the judge to avoid the case, that itself may be a bad precedent.
No, it is invariably in cases where it says dismissal withdrawn at this stage. Then he says that there is a subsequent
Then of
change.
course, then of course,
So there's not a detailed reasoning rejecting the bail application.
then of course the party need not come to the High Court. Party can go to a session court. If it is dismissed as withdrawn, then party can go to a session court also and show change of circumstance. Yes, now we come to